Alrighty, everyone. It is May 19th, 2025. I am Michael Winkler, and this is the Mike Wink Show. So we're going to hop right into it today with a strange story out of Japan. Alrighty. So we're going to jump right into it talking about Japan. So for the uninitiated, Japan has a birth rate problem right now. Japan birth rates. So to maintain a population, obviously, you need a birth rate of about 2, because for every woman that gives birth, obviously, there's a man that can't give birth. So to reach a stable, consistent birth rate that will sustain the population without any migration would be exactly a 2 birth rate. But obviously, some percentage of those births, people die in child labor, people die when they're kids or whatever, and they don't make it to adulthood. And so if you had 0 immigration, you would want a birth rate over 2. But almost every country in the world has some level of immigration, and that helps make up for that gap. So you could have a birth rate of 1.8 internally, but if you have enough immigration to make up for that gap, then it really isn't too big of a problem. But Japan is in a really serious position right now because their birth rate is as low as 1.2. Reaching a record low of 1.2 in 2023 and a further decline to 1.37 in 2024. Isn't 1.2 lower than, I think the AI is messing up here. But the birth rate is very, very low in Japan. Like it's like 1.2 or something like that, which is so low that it would need a lot. You'd need a lot of immigration to make up that gap. And furthermore, Japan's culture isn't really set up for a large amount of immigration, put aside the fact that they're an island, and so immigration to there isn't exactly the easiest, but they also have a very homogenous, very insular, arguably xenophobic culture. And my understanding is that the xenophobia thing has been getting better over the years, but it is still, my understanding is sort of a core part of that culture there. And so I don't know, they wouldn't be open to any large-scale immigration to fix this problem. So they're kind of in a really weird spot. How do they fix this problem? Well, they need to up the birth rates internally. And you may think, oh, that sounds easy. Just get people to fuck more. But it's apparently not that easy in the year 2025, when the dating scene is really terrible, when all common spaces that people would typically meet a lot of the time have either been degraded, the popularity of them has gone down, or they've been removed completely. There are so many different factors that play into why it is difficult to get the birth rate up. And that means that there's a million different ways that you could go about trying to skin this cat, right? I could conceive of numerous different ways that you can go about trying to incentivize or punish people. Incentivize people to have kids or punish people for not having kids. It seems like my understanding is the way this was presented to me was that it was a tax on single people, was that if you are not in a relationship of some kind, that you are subject to a higher tax rate than those that are in a relationship of some kind. I'm hoping this article will give me a bit more information because I have a feeling there's some details that are being left out there, and I'm interested to see how this is. Single tax to start in 2026. Is there a possibility that single people will be taxed? Financial fields / other taxes. There seems to be a lot of buzz on social media about the introduction of a singles tax in April 2026. Some people may wonder if there really is a tax increase only for singles. In this article, we will explain the rumor about the single tax and focus on whether it is true or not. The term single tax is said to be a hot topic on social media. This is the name some people are using for a system aimed at supporting child rearing. Japan is facing a declining birth rate, and the government is looking to introduce a support measure using insurance premiums. Let's take a closer look at how this system works and what its impact is. What is the Child Care Support Grant System? A Child and Child Care Support Grant System, which will be gradually introduced from fiscal year 2026, is part of Japan's efforts to combat the declining birth rate. Under this system, funds will be added to the insurance premiums paid by all citizens and used to support childcare. Funds will be added to the insurance premiums. Does that mean that they're going to have a mandatory increase to the insurance premiums to pay for this childcare stuff? That seems like that's what it's saying. How will you pay for it? Everyone is responsible, collected as an additional charge to insurance premiums. So I was right. Yes, they're going to add on additional charge. Those who won't benefit also bear the burden. Also applicable to single people and households that have finished raising children. Amount collected in the fiscal year, approximately 1 to 250 yen per person per month planned. What is it used for? Expanding child allowances. Payments extended until high school age, 3 yen per month, the third child and onwards. Pregnancy and childbirth support, 5 yen paid, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you just get paid for having kids. So they just pay you for having a below high school age kid. You get paid 5 yen per paid each when pregnancy and birth are notified. Okay, so you just get 5 yen for having birth, which is nothing. Okay, we're gonna give you like, how much is a yen? Wait, even if it was $1, even if 1 yen was $1, this would be kind of stupid. What do you want, $5 for having a kid? But hold on, Japanese yen to USD. Isn't it like $1 or 10 cents? Yeah, so 5 Japanese yen is 35 cents. Why are they even? I feel like I have to be misreading this. There's no way they're pregnancy and childbirth support, 5 yen paid each when pregnancy and birth are notified. Who cares about 35 cents? I feel like I have to. There's something wrong. There's something wrong. There's no way they would just. Who would care? What would be even the purpose of implementing that? Are you going to entice people with 35 cents? That's weird. Establishment of any child can attend kindergarten system. Okay, so free kindergarten for everybody. I guess they didn't already have that there. Maybe their school system is first grade through 12. When parents take parental leave, they receive a benefit equivalent to 10% of their take-home pay. I don't know what that means. Parental leave. Oh, parental leave. So like when your wife is, so if you're the wife and you're pregnant, or if your wife is pregnant and you're going to take time off to support them, or to start raising the kid. Okay, so if you make 100 grand a year and you say, all right, I'm going to take a month off because my wife is going to have a kid in the next week or two, and we want to have a couple weeks to kind of settle in with it, they'll say, all right, we're going to give you just 10 grand up front, just because. The purpose of this system is to create an environment that makes it easier to have and raise children, but there is an ongoing debate about the fairness of the burden. The system is called the singles tax because there are people who bear the burden but do not receive any direct benefits. But isn't that just taxation in general, right? I mean, that is the social contract inherently. You're not going to have access to every single thing your tax dollars pay for. That's part of having a functioning society. We live in a very complex, interconnected world in the year 2025, right? I mean, every single thing you have access to, your cell phone, your this bottle of bug spray, your bike helmet, everything that you could possibly have access to has gone through thousands and thousands of people's hands. The people that designed it, the people that manufactured it, the people that delivered it, the people that sold it to you. All of these, none of these things would be possible individually. And so the idea that like it takes a, what's the saying? It takes a village. Usually that's referred to raising a child, but that's referred to running a society too. It takes a village. And in that sense, anybody who's complaining about not getting the benefits from this tax program is completely missing the point of taxation, of a functioning society, of governance, of the year 20 of modern economics. They don't understand any of that. The way that could make sense is if it was overbearing. Of course, if the tax was way too much for the single people, then it would be unreasonable, and then you would have a legitimate argument because they really are bearing the burden. But even the people who have kids and are going to materially benefit from this program, they're paying taxes for things that they aren't having a direct access to, right? They're paying taxes for prisons. They're paying taxes for, I'm assuming Japan has some sort of pseudo food stamp system or universal healthcare. You're not always going to be accessing every bit of healthcare. There's certainly going to be somebody out there that's going to be more expensive healthcare wise than you, and they're going to eat up more of the tax dollars than you. And so therefore more of your tax dollars are going to pay for their healthcare than yours. It's just, I don't like this, like, it's devoid of logic. Singles and households who have finished raising children also bear the burden. Generous support for families with children, but not for single people. Opposition to the idea of raising children as a society. Okay, wait. Why do some people feel this is unfair? Singles and households who have finished raising children also bear the burden. Yeah, but that's taxation. We just went over that. Complaining that you aren't going to directly benefit from this taxation program is stupid and completely missing the point of how a government and a society should function within the, in the context of the year 2025 and modern economics and yada, yada, yada. Generous support for families with children, but not for single people. I don't see necessarily any problem with providing some level of financial support to people who have children as a small enticement. It doesn't seem like a terrible idea. Children are really expensive, and we want to give them the best lives possible. And so, assuming that most of these parents would use the money to make their children's lives better, at least to some extent, um, it's a good thing, and I'd be in favor of it. And the opposition to the idea of raising children as a society. What does that mean? Raising children as a society? It's not like we're creating like these like children's wards or something, and kids are forced to go be raised by the state or something ridiculous like that. This is just This is a very benign taxation program where we tax everybody and then use some of that money to help specifically increase the birth rates, facilitate better child care or child raising and whatnot. However, this system is not a formal tax, but functions as part of the social insurance system. Some countries have introduced a single tax in the past. The case of Bulgaria, 1968 to 1989, single people will be taxed at 5 to 10% of their income. As a result, the birth rate fell from 2.18 to 1.86. The economic burden has increased and more people are refraining from marriage and child rearing. Wait. This is strange. This doesn't make any sense. Single people will be taxed 5 to 10% of their income. Okay. So that's what they used to do in Bulgaria. As a result, the birth rate fell from 2.18 to 1.86. How could you possibly claim that the birth rate fell as a result of this single tax? My intuition would tell me that the single tax would be fighting against that, and that without it, that the decrease would be even greater, that it would be 2.18 all the way down to maybe 1.8 or lower, 1.75 or 1.5 even, or something like that. Every bit of intuition tells me that the single tax incentivizes people to be together and to have more children. And so without any further explanation, to claim that this is the reason why the birth rate fell is because directly due to this program is so facetious and wrong. The economic burden has increased and more people are refraining from marriage and child rearing. Yeah, see, that would be more, that to me seems more like what would be the reason for the decrease in the birth rate, and that to the extent that the single tax existed, it probably pushed back against that. It's impossible to know because we don't have a counterfactual, hypothetical, alternate universe where we could see what would have happened if we had not implemented that program in Bulgaria between the years of 1968 and 1989. But I speculate that it's not doing what this article says it did. Thus, although the single tax was expected to be effective as a measure to combat the declining birth rate, there have been cases in which it actually had the opposite effect. America, child tax credit reduces tax burden for families with children. And France has a program where the family allowances provide financial support to families raising children. Okay. Cases like these show that Japan's system also requires careful design. Will the financial support system increase the burden? Some people feel that the increase in insurance premiums is essentially a tax increase. Yeah, that's fair. That's completely fair. Yeah, absolutely. Especially in Japan, where I think you're required to have some sort of insurance. Without support, the birth rate could decline more rapidly and the labor shortage could worsen. Yeah, that's just okay. They're just laying out the downside of not doing a program like this. The specific amount of tax to be collected and the mechanism for it will depend on future discussions. Okay, so they don't have any of this set in stone yet. It will be necessary to keep a close eye on what impacts this will have on Japanese society and the economy in the future. Summary: the Child Care Support Grant System will be introduced from fiscal year 2026. The name single tax is a colloquial term and is not an official tax. Since insurance premiums are added to child care support, single people also bear the burden. In the case of Bulgaria, the singles tax contributed to a decline in the birth rate. I don't know how you could possibly claim that without any substantiation whatsoever. I hate it when people do this, when they make very specific claim using very specific evidence like this, and then they provide zero substantiation. And now to prove them wrong or to fact check them, I have to go spend 20 minutes doing a bunch of research and reading a bunch of articles. Whoever wrote this article spent over an hour, I can guarantee you, typing up all this and spell checking it and making sure that it was all correct. So like, why would you not go that extra little bit and just put one line in there that substantiates your claim a bit more? Frustrating. So yeah, this seems to me like a sort of backwards way of going about doing this. I think it's fairly benign. You know, if you keep the tax rate low enough, I think it's somewhat benign and ultimately not that impactful even for single people. Like, yeah, they lose a little bit of their income to taxes or whatever, but it's, they're still going to function for the most part. But I don't know if this is, I would think that tax incentives are a much better way to go about enticing, are a much better way to go about facilitating a higher birth rate using the economic system than would be punishing people for being single. I mean, obviously, there's so many layers to this. You could be in a relationship and plan to not have kids, which I would imagine is a higher percentage of people than there's ever been. Um, you could be single totally by choice, which is fine as well. I don't think necessarily you should have to be taxed more as a result of that. It seems to me like the most effective way. It's sort of like when you're training a dog. The dog is going to react much better to positive, like rewarding good behavior, rewarding what you're wanting them to do instead of punishing them when when they're doing what you don't want them to do. Usually positive reinforcement is much more effective than negative reinforcement. And I would think the similar principle applies to this whole tax, trying to incentivize birth rates to increase situation where it's like, I think it makes more sense to try and have positive reinforcement and facilitate, tax breaks and maybe, increase that 10% take home pay or the parental leave bonus to 20% or something. I mean, I think those sort of incentives would go a lot further in actually incentivizing people. It's like, what do nobody who, a huge portion of kids are accidents, and a huge portion of kids are very purposeful decisions that would have happened regardless of whether the taxation system supports it or not. So you're targeting that weird group of people in the middle that are sort of unsure about having a kid, but that maybe a tax benefit or something would push them over the edge. It's not like somebody who's single is like, oh man, to avoid this 10% tax, I'm just going to go have a baby with this. Like, no, that's not. I think there would be far less of that than people saying, I don't know, I know we've been talking about having a kid and they just made this rule that says we get $2,000 a month just for having a kid. Like, now it seems pretty enticing there, Barbara. Maybe we should do it. So I don't know. Seems like the wrong way to go about doing it. I'm fascinated to see if this actually plays out because I mean the fact that they're referencing Bulgaria in the 1968 to 1989 as their example of this being done in the past probably means this hasn't been done for quite a while, and I would be interested to see how effective it would be in the year 2025 in our current climate. Supreme Court rules against Trump administration in Alien Enemies Act case. The Supreme Court on Friday granted a request by Venezuelan nationals seeking to block their removal from the United States under the Alien Enemies Act. In a 7-2 decision, the court said the Trump administration had not given the detainees enough time or adequate resources to challenge their deportations. My understanding is that's absolutely the case. Who are these two? I mean, look, let me guess. It's Alito and Roberts. But, like, why? What is their? I almost have to read the dissent on this. I might actually read the dissent on this because I have to know what is their backwards ass reasoning that they're using to defend this. Unitary executive theory with the idea that he's a king. Basically, that's the only one I could possibly think of. Under these circumstances, notice roughly 24 hours before removal, devoid of information about how to exercise due process rights to contest that removal, surely does not pass muster, the ruling said. The justices barred the removal of the men who the Trump administration alleges are members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, pending a new decision from a lower federal appellate court. But the government may remove the named plaintiffs or punitive class members under other lawful authorities, they wrote. President Donald Trump raged against the ruling later Friday afternoon. The Supreme Court I have to read it in his voice. The Supreme Court won't allow us to get criminals out of our country, he wrote in a post on Truth Social. In a follow-up post, he complained that the court is not allowing me to do what I was elected to do. Sleepy Joe Biden allowed millions. Oh my God, I have to read this. Jesus. Sleepy Joe Biden allowed millions of criminal aliens to come into our country without any process But in order to get them out of our country, we have to go through a long and extended process, Trump wrote. This is bad and dangerous day for America. The court, in its ruling, acknowledged that the Venezuelans' interests are particularly weighty. It noted that the government is currently arguing that it cannot provide for the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, an individual deported in error to a prison in El Salvador. The justices did not rule whether the Alien Enemies Act, which the Trump administration invoked in mid-April to deport the detainees, had been applied correctly. The justices did not rule on whether the Alien Enemies Act, which the Trump administration invoked in mid-April to deport the detainees, had been applied correctly. Okay, so is this another kick the can down the road a decision that the Supreme Court has become famous for at this point, where they don't actually make a real decision, they sort of just kick it down to a lower court? Oh, gosh. To be clear, we decide today only that the detainees are entitled to more notice than was given on April 18th, their ruling said. They noted they were granting only temporary relief while the case returns to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit to sort out the question of how much notice is due to those being targeted for removal. We recognize the significance of the government's national security interests, as well as the necessity that such interests be pursued in a manner consistent with the Constitution, the majority wrote. In light of the foregoing, lower courts should address AEA cases expeditiously. Justices Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas dissented from their opinion. Oh, yeah, well, huge shocker. It was those two geniuses, those two legal titans are the ones who are against this. Let's see what their reasoning is. I'd love to please have this article go into the dissent. The conservative justices questioned whether the detainees were in imminent danger of a removal and said it was misleading to suggest that a U.S. District Court in Texas failed to act quickly enough. They literally were removed. Wait. Wasn't this from... When was this article written? May 16th. So this article was written 3 days ago. So this was from a few days ago. I would love to see more information on what they mean by it's misleading to suggest a U.S. District Court in Texas failed to act quickly enough. What would be quickly enough? Didn't they give them, like they said, 24 hours with zero information and then just kick them out of the country? The court characterizes the district court's behavior during the period in question as inaction. But in my judgment, that is unfair, wrote Alito in the dissent joined by Thomas. The court characterizes the district court's behavior during the period in question as inaction, but in my judgment, that is unfair, wrote Alito in the dissent joined by Thomas. Trump first invoked the AEA against Tren de Aragua in mid-March, claiming in an executive proclamation that the gang is perpetrating an invasion into the U.S. We've talked about this before, but the word invasion has a very specific meaning. English words mean things. We can't just obfuscate the meaning of words and pretend they can mean whatever we want them to mean in a very convenient, cynical manner. Invasion implies somebody is specifically sending them, and you cannot argue that the government, the El Salvador government, or that the gang themselves is sending these people here. These people are choosing to come here, and to the extent that a gang is formed here, that's devoid from anybody sending them. It's not an invasion. That is literally not the definition of the word invasion. Okay, they can obfuscate the word of try and obfuscate the definition of the word invasion, but it makes no sense. The proclamation declared that any Venezuelan over 14 years of age who belonged to the gang and was not a naturalized or lawful resident was subject to removal and chargeable with actual hostility against the United States. Trump on Friday morning vented frustration towards the High Court, writing that it is being played by the radical left losers whose only hope is the intimidation of the court. Oh my God, it is so cynical for him to... It is the peak, absolute top of the Mount Everest cynical for him to say that this ruling against him is an intimidation of the court after everything he's been doing, arresting judges, disregarding previous Supreme Court rulings about whether he can deport the planes full of people to El Salvador or not, extorting law firms for free pro bono work. it is peak cynical for him to be saying that this is an intimidation of the court when it is exactly what it is a pure projection because he is the one that's been intimidating the court and the legal system for quite a while now, not the other way around. That post came the day after the justices heard oral arguments in a case related to Trump's controversial executive order ending birthright citizenship. Okay, so we're going to read one more article on this. Hopefully it'll give us a little bit more information, and then maybe I'll read the dissent for that one, because I have to see how ridiculous their reasoning is and what could possibly be rooted in. Trump endorses idea that Supreme Court ruling blocking his deportations under Alien Enemies Act is illegal. President Donald Trump endorsed the idea that the United States Supreme Court had placed an illegal injunction on him by temporarily blocking his administration's ability to deport Venezuelans accused of being gang members without due process, while litigation on the matter plays out in lower courts. Truth Social on Saturday, Trump reposted two posts made by attorney Mike Davis, a close Trump ally, and the founder of the Article 3 project, calling the court's recent decision illegal and claiming it was heading down a perilous path by not allowing Trump to continue a constitutionally questionable action. The Supreme Court still has an illegal injunction on the President of the United States, preventing him from commanding military operations to expel these foreign terrorists, Davis wrote. He continued, the President should house these terrorists near the Chevy Chase Country Club with daytime release. Chevy Chase Country Club is located in Maryland near the homes of Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Brett Kavanaugh. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the nation and has the final say on legal disputes involving constitutional or federal law changes. The court told the Trump administration on Friday it would not allow it to resume deporting Venezuelans accused of belonging to a gang under the Alien Enemies Act while litigation continues in lower courts. In their decision, the justices flagged concerns about the administration bypassing due process rights. Trump raged at the justices for not allowing his Department of Homeland Security to proceed with deportations under the act, calling it bad and dangerous. His recent comments are a distinct reversal from comments he made last year, praising the court when they ruled in his favor. Saturday's endorsement of the idea that the Supreme Court, the ultimate decider of law, was carrying out an illegal act on him by not allowing him to do something that lower courts have consistently ruled against is part of a recent trend. It's more than part of a recent trend. It's literally like his whole ethos. He fantasizes about being a tin pot dictator. Like, that's what he's acting like. Trump and his administration have been accused of defying federal judges' rulings, most notably not facilitating the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, despite the Supreme Court directing the administration to do so. Okay, so they still haven't done it. So they're still actively disregarding the Supreme Court by refusing to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia, despite admitting that it's wrong for him to be there and that it was a mistake. But they don't care. The president has personally lashed out at judges who have ruled against him, asserting they are rogue or activists. Roberts and Alito and Thomas, just the most activist left-wing judges in the world. Yeah, I heard they're straight up Marxists. Guys. The president has personally lashed out at judges who have ruled against him, asserting they are rogue or activists. Roberts and Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson have both warned that attacking judges is harmful to the independence of the judiciary. His behavior has led to some concerns from critics that the president will ignore court orders and continue doing whatever he wants with the help of his allies in the government, thus overextending his presidential power. Justice Amy Coney Barrett and Elena Kagan raised some questions over Trump refusing to follow court orders during oral arguments in the challenge to birthright citizenship this past week. In a separate Truth Social post, also reposted by Trump, Davis insinuated the court is being unfair to Trump by not allowing him to resume deportations under the Alien Enemies Act. The Supreme Court must come to the rescue of America, Trump wrote. The Supreme Court must come to the rescue of America, Trump wrote in response. So it seems like the Supreme Court probably made the right decision here. I'm going to see if I can get a little bit more on the dissent here. Okay, so here's the dissent. In the AARP versus Trump 605 US 2025, this is the case that we were just talking about um, regarding the use of the Alien Enemies Act and deportations. And so this is the dissent from Alito with Thomas. I cannot join the decision of the court. First and foremost, we lack jurisdiction and therefore have no authority to issue any relief. Relief to Kilmore Abrego Garcia and these people who have been deported. Are they arguing that basically because Trump says that this is an immigration issue and that the immigration and borders are in the purview of the federal government, that he just has unlimited say and unlimited power in what he can do, that he can basically just claim it's that it's an immigration issue or that it's a border issue or whatever, and that the justices, regardless of any other circumstances, are just going to be like, we're good. Y'all, you can have it. That seems insane to me. Second, even if we had such authority, the applicants have not satisfied the requirement for the issuance of injunctive relief pending appellate review. Third, granting certiorari before any decision on the merits has been made by either the district court or the Court of Appeals is unwarranted. What do you mean it's unwarranted? I think what he means by granting certiorari is this sort of temporary injunction, basically saying, hey guys, quit your nonsense while we figure out if this is legal or not. We think there's a decent enough chance that it could be illegal that we want you to just stop it right now. And then if we say it's fine, then you can, if we say it's all kosher, then you can resume it. But like these are people that are being held in a gulag in El Salvador. How could you mean that that is unwarranted? When would it be warranted if it's not warranted in this circumstance? Jurisdiction is power to declare law, and without jurisdiction, the court cannot proceed at all. Ex parte, Macara, blah, blah. So in order for us to do anything in this manner, we must assure ourselves that we have jurisdiction. The court's theory of jurisdiction, as I understand it, is as follows. We have jurisdiction to review a case that is properly before one of the federal courts of appeals. This case was properly before the Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit because the two habeas petitioners, AARP and WMM, took an appeal from a district court order that refused to issue an injunction. Although the district court never actually issued such an order or said that it would do so, the district court constructively denied injunction relief by failing to act under circumstances where prompt intervention was urgently needed. Wait. This theory rests on okay, so basically this paragraph he's laying out what his understanding of the majority's argument in this case. And he's basically saying that they argued that the court dropped the ball. The district court in question should have accepted the injunction and placed a temporary restraining order on the actions of the administration, and that it is the district court's fault that these people that this situation we have deemed to be too bad. That is the reason why this has all happened. This theory rests on a mischaracterization of what happened in the district court. I do not dispute that a district court's failure to act expeditiously may, in some circumstances, have the practical effect of refusing an injunction, and thus entitle a party to take an interlocutory appeal. Carson v. American Brands, Inc. Blah, blah, blah. But that principle does not apply here where A, the district court has no good reason to think that either AARP or WMM has an imminent danger of removal. The record at the time contained only sketchy evidence about any imminent threat to members of the class of alien detainees they sought to have certified. And the court took the entirely reasonable position that it would wait for the government to respond to the applicant's request for a temporary restraining order before acting. The court set a very short deadline for the filing of the government's response, and the court was working diligently on the difficult issues presented by the applicant's requests for relief for themselves and the members of the putative class. The court asserts that the district court failed to act for 14 hours and 28 minutes at 3, but that is misleading. Here is what actually happened on the evening of blah, blah, blah. Seems to me on the surface that basically Alito and Thomas, the dissent, are making procedural arguments here, that they aren't arguing against any any fundamental piece of what this is arguing. They're mainly making the argument like, well, you said they'd give him 24 hours and they only gave him 18 hours, and therefore we should just throw out the whole case, sort of thing. Um, I don't know if the district court necessarily handled every single procedural step as perfectly as they could have, but I don't think, I mean, there's absolutely no way he would use that standard to overturn a case that that he likes, right? This is, Alito and Thomas they have a track record of just very using legal arguments and reasoning only when it's convenient for them, but completely disregarding it when it is not convenient to whatever position or whatever case they want to see win. Okay, so a couple episodes ago, we talked about the Trump administration's, this second admin's, new trans-military ban. So the first Trump administration implemented a trans-military ban, but it wasn't nearly as extensive as the one that we're seeing now. The one we're seeing now is far more targeted, and it's actively trying to kick people that are currently in the military that identify as transgender out of the military. And just a quick mention of one of the small things you may not think about immediately when you hear that sort of thing is that there's a lot of transgender troops that are at the 14, 15, 16, 17-year mark of military service. And typically when you're in the military, the 20-year mark is when you are eligible for retirement benefits, but they do have an expedited retirement program where you can get it somewhere between 50 and 20 years, typically right around the 18-year mark. And so there are a number, potentially hundreds of these service members who identify as transgender, who are on their 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th year of service, who are mere months or only a handful of years away from their retirement package or retirement benefits or whatever that they rightfully are owed, they've been working towards for a decade or two, will not be eligible to receive those benefits, and that they will be banished, kicked out of the military just before they're able to receive them, which is horrible. And there's a whole lot of other cascading effects that very tangibly affect these people's lives. I think it's so easy. Most people don't know any transgender people in their lives. And so it's very easy to just sort of think of the group of transgender people as sort of this ethereal group that's detached from you, that's far away. It's sort of like almost when you hear about something horrible happening on the other side of the world. It's like, well, that's completely detached from me. There's nothing I can do. That's happening in Myanmar or something. What the heck? Why would I even spend any time thinking about this? And so you don't take it that seriously. But transgender people are real people. They live here in the United States, and they should be subject to all the same rights and the same moralistic treatment from the government as anybody else, obviously. Military commanders told to identify troops for medical checks under Trump administration's transgender ban. Military commanders will be told to identify troops in their units who are transgender or who have gender dysphoria, then send them to get medical checks in order to force them out of the service, officials said Thursday. A senior defense official laid out. So they did something kind of cynical. So my understanding was when they came in initially, this administration, they said like, all right, guys, just be honest with us. Come forward with your, if you have dysphoria or if you're transgender or whatever, and we'll treat you right, and we'll your transparency and your honesty will go a long way. But it seems to me like that is exactly the opposite of what they did. They wanted these people to come forward and bring forth this information voluntarily so that they could use it in a cynical, bad faith manner and use that exact information to kick them out of the military, severely diminishing the amount of trust that any regular person should have in the military holding their own personal records. Even if you're not transgender, this is a huge hit to the trust and integrity of the military itself. A senior defense official laid out what could be a complicated and lengthy new process aimed at fulfilling President Donald Trump's directive to remove transgender service members from the U.S. military. The new order to commanders relies on routine annual health checks that service members are required to undergo. Another defense official said the Defense Department has scrapped, for now, plans to go through troops' health records to identify those with gender dysphoria. Instead, transgender troops. The new order to commanders relies on routine annual health checks that service members are required to undergo. Another defense official said the Defense Department has scrapped, for now, plans to go through troops' health records to identify those. Okay, so that's a really good thing that at least for now they're going to scrap that. That itself was a huge hit to the integrity and trust of the military. This still will be a hit to the trust and integrity of the military, but that is a good thing. That is objectively a good thing that they've scrapped that, and I sure hope that they don't bring that back. Like, imagine if you're a service member, you've been a loyal military member for over 10 years, and once or twice when you went in a routine health check, maybe you went to go see a psychologist for a visit or two, you mentioned maybe having some gender dysphoric type thoughts and feelings. Imagine just casually mentioning that, you think you're just accessing healthcare, you think that you are an important part of this machine, that the military respects you, that you respect the military. But that then could turn around and bite you in the ass, and that the fact that you just happen to mention it once or twice means you're going to get completely kicked out of the military is that would be really, really bad. I think maybe even the military commanders realize how bad that could be. Instead, transgender troops who do not voluntarily come forward could be outed by commanders or others aware of their medical status. Gender dysphoria occurs when a person's biological sex does not match up with their gender identity. The defense officials spoke on condition of anonymity to provide details of the new policy. The process raises comparisons to the early "don't ask, don't tell" policy, which at times had commanders or other troops outing gay members of the military who, at the time, were not allowed to serve openly. Active duty troops will have until June 6th to voluntarily identify themselves to the Defense Department, and troops in the National Guard and Reserve have until July 7th. The department is offering a financial incentive to those who volunteer to leave. So I thought I read about this earlier. I haven't seen any exact details, and I have been unable to find any exact details on if this incentive is actually meaningful or if it's a joke, and it's just a token. But my understanding is that to some extent they are trying to entice these people and trying to give them some sort of pseudo severance package to maybe make the off ramp of leaving the military not quite as bad as it could have been. But I don't think they're doing it out of the kindness of their hearts, like I just said. I think they're doing it because just how bad it looks to not give them any kind of severance or anything like that. And so I think they realize this is just a pure optics thing. They probably don't want to have to do this, but they're just like, we'll do it just for a pure optics thing. The department is offering a financial incentive to those who volunteer to leave. They will receive roughly double the amount of separation pay than those who don't come forward. Okay, so what are they basing that off of? I'd love to see the details. Initially, officials said the Defense Department would begin going through medical records to identify anyone who did not come forward voluntarily. That detail was not included in the new guidance released Thursday. Yeah, when I read an article talking about this a week ago or so, before Thursday, that was what was in there, and that's what they said, that they were going to start going through the records and finding, there could be up to a couple thousand people that get kicked out as a result of it. So this must be a very recent change. While the department believes it has the authority to review medical records, it would rather go through a more routine health assessment process, the defense official said. Traditionally, all service members go through a health assessment once a year to determine if they are still medically able to serve. A new question about gender dysphoria is being added to that assessment. Active duty troops who do not voluntarily come forward would have to acknowledge their gender dysphoria during that medical check, which could be scheduled months from now. A unit commander could expedite the health assessment. So what would be really cynical is if they're basically providing this is like an unnecessary hurdle that these people have to leap. Basically, they're saying to those who have admitted that they have gender dysphoria, we're saying to them, hey, on your next medical check, you better say that you have dysphoria and get kicked out of the military voluntarily. Otherwise, we might go through the records and find it ourselves that you said this in the past, and then give you no severance or half the severance that you would have received if you jumped the hurdle that we put in front of you. Under the new policy, commanders who are aware of service members in their units with gender dysphoria, a history of gender dysphoria, or symptoms consistent with gender dysphoria will direct individualized medical record reviews of such service members to confirm compliance with medical standards. The defense officials said it is the duty of the service member and the commander to comply with the new process. The department is confident and comfortable with commanders implementing the policy, and it does not believe they would use the process to take retribution against a service member, the senior defense official said. Oh yeah, you don't think they would do that? Could you? Yeah, that's really reassuring. You're like, we don't think they do that. We acknowledge that it's a possibility. This is basically them saying we acknowledge it's a possibility that could happen, and that the mechanisms are in place for such a thing like that to happen, and that there really isn't anything we could do to stop somebody or punish somebody if that is in fact what they were doing. But we don't think they're going to do it. We hope they aren't going to do it. It's fine, whatever. We're not going to worry about it. It comes after the Supreme Court recently ruled that the Trump administration could enforce the ban on transgender people in the military while other legal challenges proceed. The court's 3 liberal justices said they would have kept the policy on hold. Officials have said that as of December 9th, 2024, there were 4,240 troops diagnosed with gender dysphoria in the active duty, National Guard, and Reserve. But they acknowledge the number may be higher. There are about 2.1 million total troops serving. In a statement, Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell said earlier this month that about 1,000 troops already have identified themselves and will begin the voluntary separation process from the military. That can often take weeks. Trump tried to ban transgender troops during his first term while allowing those currently serving to stay on. Then President Joe Biden overturned the ban. The new policy does not grandfather in those currently serving and only allows for limited waivers or exceptions. The Trump and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth alleged that troops with gender dysphoria don't meet military standards. Hegseth has tied his opposition to a campaign to rid the department of wokeness. No more trans at DOD, Hegseth wrote in a post on X. In a recent speech to a special operations conference, he said, no more dudes in dresses, we're done with that shit. Oh my God. It is so sad that the Defense Secretary of the United States of America, Pete Whiskey Leaks Hegseth, is legitimately out there, the spokesman for our military, which is supposed to be the most powerful, best military in the whole world, is out there making completely brainless claims about the effectiveness of the military. The only reason it would make sense to kick trans people out of the military is if they are not good at fighting. They create more problems than they fix, and that they are not good at fighting and are unable to perform the duties of the military properly. That would be the only argument that would make sense against banning. That would be the only argument that would make sense for banning transgender troops in the military. But none of that is substantiated at all statistically, and furthermore, that's just not how military readiness works. Military readiness is a standardized threshold that everybody must meet and reach above in order to be eligible to serve in the military. And to that extent, transgender people are subject to the exact same threshold. So regardless if you're, are you telling me that if you have 2 totally buffed out 28-year-old military experts, they've special ops, they've been trained in everything, they can bench press 500 pounds, they're 6'3", they're both completely competent and would make excellent military members and excellent fighters in both actual normal 21st century military situations involving guns and artillery, and in some sort of medieval hand-to-hand combat situation, they would be perfectly effective. But one of them likes to wear dresses and calls themselves transgender, and the other doesn't. The idea that the one that is wearing the dress and calling themselves transgender is somehow now all of a sudden not military ready and is less of a potent fighting force as the guy standing next to him that is a more traditionally masculine dude, is just so stupid. And not only is it stupid, it's really disrespectful to all the trans troops in the military currently and in the past who died. I'm sure there were people in World War II in the United States way before transgenderism was anywhere near accepted or part of the zeitgeist. That there were some that have what we would now call gender dysphoria, that were internally transgender and that gave up their lives trying to defend this country. And so it's so disrespectful for him it's so stupid and disrespectful for him to be making all these claims and to just say it so blasé, to being transgender is a pretty significant thing, right? Like it requires a tremendous amount of introspection, a tremendous amount of thoughtfulness, and a tremendous amount of courage to actually go through with doing it. And so to just so lazily, so in such a mean way, just call them dudes in dresses. We're done with that shit, bro. Get out of here. It's just so like, it's just so stupid, bro. It's like, it's just disappointing, man. It's just disappointing. Alrighty, let's move on. Tornado warnings delayed because of Doge cuts. Of all the disasters I've studied, tornadoes scare me the most. They come with little warning and can erase entire communities in minutes, even seconds. There's no 4-day lead up to prepare like we often have with major hurricanes, and the winds of these storms can far exceed the most violent tropical cyclones. In those few moments before one hits, especially if you're sleeping, you're at the mercy of your local weather station. If someone is watching, they can issue a warning in those critical minutes before it's too late. Those few minutes after an emergency alert is issued are the difference between life and death. That's why experts were shocked and outraged by budget cuts made to the National Weather Service earlier this year. Some offices were forced to no longer operate 24 hours a day back in April. Wait, the National Weather Service, some of their offices can't operate 24/7? Bro, I don't know if you know this, but the weather happens 24/7, right? If you're asleep, it could be raining or it could not be raining. Or if you're awake, it could be raining or it could not be raining. The idea that we would defund the National Weather Service to the point that it can't operate 24 hours a day is maddening. In the Jackson, Kentucky NWS office, one of the positions they were forced to cut was the full-time overnight forecaster. The office's website even lists the meteorologist in charge position as vacant. Overnight forecasters are responsible for monitoring severe weather outbreaks and issuing warnings while one of the most tornado-prone areas in the country is sound asleep. It's only a matter of time before these cuts lead to tragedy, I said back in February. Just before midnight last night, tragedy struck. At least 27 people are dead, with more still missing across Missouri and Kentucky. Tornado warnings were delayed because of reduced staff. Those critical moments, a midnight warning to your phone waking you up, giving you precious seconds to find shelter, came too late for some. The risk of these cuts creating this exact problem was known before last night. Just one day before the disaster on May 15th, the New York Times ran an investigative piece about how Doge cuts were undermining weather forecasting improvements. The piece specifically included the Jackson, Kentucky NWS office as one targeted by Doge for layoffs. Here's a quote from that article, I suppose. Those who stuck around have often been drawn to its public service mission. The Weather Service's forecasters study all that data they have collected and tell people when a tornado is racing near, how bad the hurricane season could be, where a wildfire might explode, and how the wind can fuel it. Mr. Fay said one of the offices that is unable to staff an overnight forecaster is in Jackson, Kentucky, in an area that has endured years of destructive flooding. In the first half of February, the office's forecasters issued 22 flash flood warnings for many of the 33 counties it oversees, as heavy rain swallowed parts of the region. At least 11 people died. Severe weather is expected to continue today and tomorrow, and NOAA's new PR team, now run by Trump loyalists, is scrambling to deny and defuse the situation. We can't ask those who died if they received the warning, so we might never know how many lives would have been saved by having minimal staffing standards in NWS offices. As the MAGA rampage against... Yeah, it's so insane. Oh my God, the idea of minimal staffing standards is like a North Star. We are. I'm trying to think of an analogy. We're stuck in a cave, and the single strand of light coming out from the end of the cave is the idea of minimal staffing standards in the context of these cuts. The idea that would make so much more sense and would make a lot of these cuts so much more defendable. The fact that they don't have any common sense standards in place to like filter these cuts through, such as having minimal staffing standards for the NWS offices or whatever, it shows to me that there's zero planning, zero forethought, zero actual like consideration or 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 logic put behind any of this. It's just purely cut money. Government do stuff bad, therefore money of government doing stuff good. And we just want to cut money of the government doing stuff regardless. And one of the ways to do that is by reducing the staffing at the NWS offices. I would only imagine we're going to see more of this kind of thing. And what's really, really unfortunate about all of this is that unless you're reading this article like I am right now, you're probably not making this connection. If you're one of the 27 people who died, you're dead. So I guess it doesn't matter. But like, let's say you're one of the family members of one of these people who died, or you're somebody who didn't die but got injured, or you're somebody whose house got destroyed. You didn't get injured, but your house was destroyed or partially destroyed or whatever. You would never be able to make this connection unless you read this article, right? Most people don't understand that the National Weather Service provides most of the data and stuff that these local news weather channels provide, and that the NWS furthermore provides a lot of these big warnings for things like tornadoes and hurricanes and stuff. Most people don't know this, and I think that's fair. I wouldn't expect most people to know all of the intricacies about how our weather service system collects data and distributes it. I don't expect everybody to know that, but this is one of those really hidden issues where it's like it's hidden. It's hidden from it's on the surface level. You can't see it. You have to dig deeper, and it's sad that so many people aren't going to make this connection. And I would worry. Yeah, it's really unfortunate, and I think there's going to be a lot more examples of things very similar to this occurring that are complex, and require a deeper understanding of civics and the mechanisms by which our society functions, an understanding of which most people don't have. And so you're going to have a lot more of these things happening where like bad shit happens like this. Potentially 10 people or so died that could have been saved if they were able to issue a warning or not. But the public would never know that, or most of the public would never know that unless you read this sort of article and put these connections together in your head. So I covered this story a bit a few episodes ago, but I got interrupted partway through and I never ended up finishing it. So I think I'm going to restart it. Um, Even though the Daily Mail is a complete slop publication, um, that doesn't mean that they could never have anything that's useful. And this article does seem like it's fairly extensive and covers a lot of topics related to this. So I think it is maybe worth reading. We'll see. So yeah, my understanding of what this is basically is that Kristi Noem, who's sort of one of the like trolls of the Trump administration, one of the people out there who seems to be their whole purpose is to just say controversial stuff and trigger the libs. She's out there was out there casually floating the idea of an immigration game show where immigrants would compete for U.S. citizenship, which is just like that's some like dystopian like Black Mirror uh, X-Files level nonsense. Like that is beyond anything I could have ever imagined 6 months ago before this administration took office. And also, it looks so bad. How could you not? How to any sane person, political or apolitical, this is a bad look. This is a bad look. It's sort of like homeless fighting or whatever. What are you gonna pay homeless people $5 each to fight each other? That's fucked up. That's a fucked up look. So this is the same dynamic. She's been called Ice Barbie for trading her cabinet position like a TV production, but now Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem is pushing for an actual reality show pitting immigrants against each other for the honor of fast-tracking their way to U.S. citizenship. It may sound like a joke, but the idea is for real and is outlined in a 35-page program pitch put together in coordination with the DHS secretary, DailyMail.com can exclusively reveal. Exclusively reveal? Who's giving DailyMail.com exclusive information? Who on earth would have interesting exclusive information they want to bring to a news publication and that would make big news? And they choose the Daily Mail. That's insane to me. Also, what's insane is that this is a legitimate thing. When I heard about this, I thought this was going to be like a a one-off comment, or at most just sort of a trolling point, or maybe they even repeat it a few times, but there's no actual teeth behind this, and they never actually had any serious intention of making this happen. If there's a 35-page program pitch, a real program pitch, 35 pages, that means that they actually thought about this. This is actually a serious thing they're wanting to do. Nome is even offering up officials from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services to tally votes for the Made for TV contest. The pitch comes from Rob Warsoff, a writer and producer known for Duck Dynasty, the A&E reality show about a Louisiana family and its hunting empire, and Bravo's Millionaire Matchmaker. Wow, yeah, I really trust the guy who made Duck Dynasty to be like really respectful, to be really apolitical, to be really even-handed, to be not cynical, to not be xenophobic or racist or no. The guy who made Duck Dynasty would never do any of it, ever. Why would you ever even think? Duck Dynasty is the most progressive left-wing show you've ever seen in your entire life. The proposed series is called The American, named after the train that contestants would ride around the country, competing in regionally specific cultural contests such as rolling logs in Wisconsin. It would lead to a grand finale with the winner sworn in on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. Along the way, we will be reminded what it means to be American through the eyes of the people who want it most, reads Warsoff's pitch. I talked about this earlier when I partially covered this article, but to me, this shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be American, right? They think of American as the same as they would think of a different nationality. So they think of a Chinese person, right? They think of Chinese culture and a Chinese person who embodies that culture or whatever. And there are certain things they can think of. They can think of the cuisine. They can think of landmarks. They can think of activities. They can think of the language, the kanji or whatever. There's so many different things they can think of. When you think of a French person, you can think of the same thing. When you think of a Japanese person or an Ethiopian person, all of these things have very distinct cultural identities. I would argue that the United States cultural identity is inherently a mix of everything, that we are unique. The United States is very unique in that regard, and that I would class it completely different than all of these other countries that have a single cultural sort of identity. The United States does not have that single cultural identity. Our identity is inherently in our diversity. We are a country that was formed only a couple hundred years ago, and this whole continent was populated only by Native Americans up until the 1600s or something, 1500s, and so we are inherently a country of people that immigrated in large chunks. We had the Irish come in during the potato famine. We had all the English people come in at the start, in the early 1700s. We had Spanish people coming in the 1500s and 1600s. I mean, the idea that we are, I think this just shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be American, and I think that's so ironic for that to be the case when they're pitching a show called The American. I think the whole point of all this is that this is all cynical, and that my gut, I would be surprised. I would almost guarantee you that this is going to be some weird xenophobic show, and that it's not, that they're going to try and make it heartwarming, but really, and on its surface, it may not seem xenophobic and racist, but if you look beyond the surface level at all, it's going to be ridiculous. Warsoff, who himself was born in Canada, said, "I'm not affiliated with any political ideology. As an immigrant myself, I am merely trying to make a show that celebrates the immigration process, celebrate what it means to be American, and have a national conversation about what it means to be American through the eyes of the people who want it most." With that kind of selling, he could sell ice to an Eskimo, bro. This dude's a salesman. Tricia McLaughlin, the top spokesperson for DHS, acknowledged the agency staff are reviewing this pitch and had a call with the producer last week. She insisted Nome is yet to be briefed on the initiative. However, DailyMail.com has confirmed that Nome supports the project and wants to proceed, and McLaughlin said, "I think it's a good idea." Warsoff's project comes as Nome is wanting to showcase what it means to become an American amid the Trump administration's crackdown on illegal immigration. She and her agency have been working for weeks to get such a project greenlit from Netflix or other streaming or cable service, services, such sources tell dailymail.com. But while past outreach has fallen flat, they're hoping this one has a real chance. In his pitch, Warsaw 49 expresses confidence that the American would be a commercial hit and lends itself to enormous corporate sponsorship opportunities. At the same time, there's concern among some in DHS about the possible optics of turning the plight of Americans into a reality game show, sources say. How is that not the front of your mind? There's concern among some in DHS. Some. I want to meet the person who doesn't have this concern, who thinks that this is just totally fine. Bro, they have their head buried in the sand. Nome is already suffering from the perception she cares more about image than fulfilling her responsibility to protect the homeland. Back down on immigration. When will Secretary Nome stop prioritizing staged photo ops and media stunts? One source asked. The focus on self-promotion is undermining our ability to deliver on President Trump's deportation mandate. We need leadership committed to logistics and results, not financial gain or reality show theatrics. As described in Word. So it's hilarious that the people they're quoting that are against this, or the people that they're referencing are against this, are not against this because it's a bad look and because it belittles these people trying to just come into this country, but that it undermines the Trump administration. Basically, that they understand it's bad optics. They're acknowledging it's bad optics in the same way I am, but they're not saying it's bad because it's morally bad. Which I am. They're saying it's bad because it undermines our ability to practically get things done. Things I would argue are very bad. As described in Warsaw's pitch, contestants from various countries and backgrounds would be pre-vetted and arrive at Ellis Island in New York City aboard the Citizenship, a boat symbolizing a new beginning. They'd be greeted by the host, a famous naturalized American who was also born in another country. Warsaw's pitch names Colombian-born Sofia Vergara, Canadian Ryan Reynolds, and Mila Kunis, who hails from Ukraine, as possible hosts who'd greet each contestant with a welcome gift, a personalized baseball glove. Bro, why? Oh, this is so funny. Oh my gosh. I couldn't make this up if I tried. Contestants would then travel state to state meeting interesting Americans and learning about the history, culture, and quirks of each region. Viewers in turn will learn about each wannabe American and why they want to live here. We'll join in the laughter, tears, frustration, and joy, hearing their backstories as we are reminded how amazing it is to be American through the eyes of 12 wonderful people who want nothing more than to have what we have, the pitch reads. The immigrants would be divided into teams who'd face off in 1-hour episodes. Scenes envisaged include one in San Francisco, where the immigrants are sent down a mine to collect the most gold. In Cape Canaveral, Florida, the hub of NASA, contestants would rush to build and launch a rocket. In Hayward, Wisconsin, they'd struggle to keep their balance on logs. My laptop battery done died at the park. So, we're back here. Back at the abode. There would also be elimination challenges where contestants get divided into 2 groups. The teams would raft down the Arkansas River in Colorado, dig clams in Maine, put together a chassis for a 1914 Model T Ford on an assembly line in Detroit, and deliver mail via horseback and ferry from Missouri to Kansas. Some of this is just so ridiculous. Although there will be a clear winner who will become our newest fellow American, Warsaw makes it clear losers will have all been pre-screened for eventual citizenship, so we'll have a leg up when it comes to applying for citizenship in a more traditional way. Game prizes would be iconically American, such as 1 million American Airlines points. Not even $1 million, just 1 million American Airlines points. That's hilarious. A $10,000 Starbucks gift card or a lifetime supply of 76 gasoline. Imagine if you get the 10,000 Starbucks gift card and you're like begging people to buy this gift card from you at a discounted rate. They spent $10,000. They gave Starbucks $10,000 for this gift card, and that you could only manage to sell it for maybe $8,000. I don't know. It's just really funny to think about. The live finale would feature the live finale would feature the train breaking at its final stop, Washington D.C., where the winner walks to Capitol Hill for a swearing-in ceremony. As Thunderbird pilots fly overhead, a top American politician or judge will perform the swearing-in, read Warsaw's pitch. There won't be a dry eye within 10 miles. This dude could sell ice to an Eskimo. He seems like a salesman of all salesmen. He's the king of used car salesmen. Even before this latest reality TV show pitch, Gnome 53 faced mounting criticism for penchant for documenting and dramatizing the work of her department. Yeah, is she the one that greenlit Dr. Phil going on rides with immigration enforcement people and that weird stuff that came out? I wouldn't be surprised if she's the one who's responsible for all of that. One particularly awkward photo shoot shows her wearing an ill-fitting bulletproof vest, toting a machine gun that is accidentally pointed at the head of a Border Patrol officer. In another apparent photo op, Gnome angers liberals for wearing an expensive watch while simultaneously berating suspected gangsters at a notorious El Salvador prison where the Trump administration banished some immigrants. Yeah, this is what I saw some funny jokes that were like, bro, somebody should open that door and just push her ass in there and close it. I'm 100% on board with that, bro. Open that fucking door and shove her. DailyMail.com has obtained photos showing how she has even adorned the walls of the agency offices with framed pictures showing her in rough and tough photo ops. The Wall Street Journal last month published a scathing report about her made-for-TV approach to Homeland Security. The article pointed out how just days after she took office as head of Homeland Security, she joined ICE agents on a pre-dawn raid in New York City and tweeted about it before the raid had even concluded. Insiders told the outlet that her post potentially alerted targets to the operation and ultimately resulted in fewer arrests than officials had expected. Live this AM from New York City, I'm on it. Gnome posted on Twitter at 4:43 a.m. on January 28th, along with a picture of herself hopping into a vehicle wearing an ICE baseball cap. Bro, there's this subreddit I see. It's called like First Responders Cringe, where it's like policemen and security guards and firefighters and those kind of people that like post these really like self-indulgent, like, I'm so tough, I'm out here to protect you, or I'm the wolf always protects the sheep, or like these weird like cringy them trying to be deep posts where like they'll post a picture of them like holding a gun just like this, and it'll have some caption like, here to protect the people, or good luck getting past me, or something really stupid like that. This is giving me first responder the subreddit r first responder cringe vibes, this picture right here, especially with Kristi Noem. Even if Kristi Noem wasn't here, it would still be kind of cringe, especially with this dude. This dude on the right is really enjoying he's really enjoying this photo op way more than he should. High-profile conservatives, including Meghan McCain and Megyn Kelly, have torched the DHS secretary for her repeated photo ops in recent weeks, arguing that her desire for attention serves as a smokescreen to distract from the fact her agency has so far failed to fulfill Trump's central campaign promise to deport millions of illegal immigrants. We are doing this right. I feel like I need to read it. I'm going to get in it. You know what? Christine, I'm so ridiculous. I'm just going to read it in Trump's voice. We are doing this right. We are doing what President Donald Trump promised the American people, making our streets safe. This is AM from New York City. I'm on it. Within her own department, some reportedly view her as little more than a spokeswoman or face of the operation. Yeah, my understanding is that she is the administration's immigration troll. Stephen Miller is sort of their economics troll. He'll come out and say really trolly economic things that are really stupid, just to trigger the libs and piss everybody off and be a distraction from the actual more benign bad things they're doing. Kristi Noem is the immigration version of that for this administration. She is out there pretty much exclusively to trigger the libs, to troll, to say insane stuff, and to distract from the more benign but also horrible things that are going on at the exact same time. Noem introduced herself to her new workforce by walking on stage at a town hall meeting to the country song Hot Mama, insiders claim. Since then, she's made a series of changes which have ruffled feathers within the department, from pushing voluntary staff exits to implementing the use of lie detector tests to root out disloyal staff and leakers. That shows that, that to me, there's so many things that would indicate this, but if none of the other more surface level things have not indicated that she is a bad faith actor, that she's an insane person, the fact that she thinks lie detector tests, she's giving her staff and people in the department lie detector tests as if that is an indicator of anything is just this satire is dead. Satire is fully dead. In spite of the criticism, the administration's border policies have delivered some success, with illegal crossings down to the lowest point in decades. Okay, so that was the whole article. I thought there was more to this. Okay, yeah, so this is like beyond, right? If you would have told me 10 years ago, if you would have told me during the first Trump administration that the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, would be advocating for making this like really cynical, I would argue inherently racist, or maybe not inherently racist, but like this very weird game show idea that like takes advantage of the illegal, the controversy around illegal immigrants right now is just so ridiculous. And like, this is one of those things where it goes well beyond being just like, this goes beyond something that you should be mad about, right? This goes full horseshoe back to just being hilarious. This is so ridiculous. It's hilarious. How can you not laugh at the concept of this? It's disgusting. Don't get me wrong. Like, this is based on so many wrong things, but um I'd also be lying to say that this isn't hilarious. Like, this isn't hilarious in the sense that this should be satire, right? That this is just so beyond the realm of what I think is reasonable, what reasonable minds would advocate for, and what reasonable minds would want to do. This is so far beyond that. It's really funny, honestly. This is so crazy. I would guess that this. I don't know, man. I would say I don't think that this is going to actually pan out, but like, knowing this administration and where the Duck Dynasty falls within the context of this administration and the modern Republican Party and MAGA and whatnot, it would actually not surprise me one bit if this thing ends up happening. And furthermore, I don't know how far in the pipeline this is, so I wouldn't make a statement like I'd be surprised if it didn't happen, but I would not be surprised if it happened, and I would not. And I almost guarantee you that anybody who's taking part in this is a bad faith actor, is not a good person. Whatever judge, whatever high level politician they get to do the swearing in on the steps of the Capitol, whatever, at the end of the competition for the winner, is that whoever says yes to that should not be taken with any level of seriousness whatsoever, at all. And any Democrat that would go along, or any independent, or anybody who I would ostensibly think is maybe more sane than this, and should be above this, ends up actually going along with this, they should be kicked out of politics completely. They should be canceled from politics, because it's just unacceptable to actually be on board with this. Completely unacceptable. And it's just so funny too. What the heck? Just read this article title, bro. Satire is dead. Ice Barbie Kristi Noem is backing insane reality TV show where immigrants compete for fast-tracked citizenship. This could be an Onion article 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 100%. Now, what does the Onion even make anymore? Is the Onion out of business? I think most satire publications are legitimately out of business at this point, or like, they have to be trending towards being out of business. Or maybe they just transition into being an actual news site. That would be a really funny transition for the Onion. If they came out and were basically like, hey guys, satire is dead and we can't do satire anymore because it's too close to what's actually happening. So we're just going to start reporting on what's actually happening. That'd be really funny. I would start reading the Onion all the time then. Alrighty. And I think that's it for today. It has been May 19th, 2025. I am Michael Winkler, and this is The Mike Wink Show. Peace out, y'all.